other than Newman Smith's entire staff, which is what they do on all of their buildings. But Joel, I think, knew more about this building than really everybody else except for Mr. Newman. Kenny Newman met with me about 2 months prior to them getting the commission of the building. And he drew the building on a napkin in 20 minutes, complete with the window. By the end of the building, he did 2 things to me. Number one, because I had changed the design so many times on him and changed the direction, he took my desk and he cemented it into the floor so I could never move it. And the second thing he did was he put a stick of dynamite, or he created this dynamite bomb, complete with a clock, and said, you've put a lot of these on my desk, now you have one. About 4 years later, we had a bomb threat, and the West Bloomfield police came into my office, and they put the bomb into their bomb disposal unit. But we still have that bomb. It's here. So it's part of my great memories of Kenny. May he rest in peace. But because Joel is a member here, and Joel knows a lot about the insides of this, where I just learned how to talk to Kenny and to him and to give him, and they listened so well, he can give you the insides and the outsides of what's going on. Where do we want to start, Joel?
Well, it's funny you made the story about Ken. Ken was dyslexic, so he had the ability to draw upside down towards you and literally would start in one corner and work a rendering, and next thing you know, the person on the other side's eyes would light up, and it was like an amazing talent that was, everybody was always in awe of that. We shared a desk for 25 years, a 5x5 square. He sat on one side, I sat on the other. He listened to opera, I listened to Grateful Dead. It was a great relationship. Miss him dearly. It'll be 15 years this January. We had a beautiful service right in this sanctuary, and the immediate community came out. That's enough said about Ken. Every day I miss him.
No, you can't say enough about Kenny.
I found, though, Daniel, the original concept statement. It said, the sanctuary at the center of the temple, the bima at the center of the sanctuary, the ark, the focus of the bima, lighted by a glow of a great stained glass window, a sanctuary, a room, circular in form, a form clearly the most elemental of all forms, a form that allows all to be close together and to the Torah, all bathed in God's light from above. Pretty good statement.
Fantastic statement. Now you have to understand that I came from Bethel, which was just in the same form as every parochial church. A normative church is supposed to be in the form of a cross, that you're supposed to have it straight out as the bar of the cross, and then there has to be an aisle across to create that. But it's a rectangular form. So the furthest row at Bethel was the 45th row. And when you sat in the 45th row, the rabbi and everything else was this big. And the bima had to be high up because the rabbi who helped build that wanted to be above the congregation, to look down at the congregation so the congregation would look up at him and therefore get the respect of the congregation. The ark was built as tall and as long, and it was made of brass. There was, it was a rather large building. I always felt that people were too far away. So I asked Kenny, I want people to be close. I want the furthest row to be close. How do you put more people into a building, into a sanctuary? And the answer was a circle. You create a semicircle. And then I said to him, you know, this reminds me of something. It's the Sanhedrin. It's the ancient Congress of Judea, where you had different political parties sitting in different sections. And those people who were most important were sitting here, on the sides, lifting up. So the Pharisees sat on one side, the Sadducees sat on the other side, and everybody else in the center who would decide what was going on would listen to both sides of every argument. And that is why we built these grandstands. This we saw in a congregation, a Methodist congregation. Again, I was unemployed for 8 months, so I visited various congregations. I also applied to law school and made Yale. And I was going to go to law school because I thought this was it for me. I was ruined as a rabbi. I thought I had time left to go to law school and I'd be a judge maybe. And Yale seemed to be the place. And I was scheduled to go to Yale, and 30 families came to see me. And 2 are sitting over there, as a matter of fact. And they said, we want our rabbi. Can you give us a shot? And I said, talk is cheap. Building a congregation is very expensive. You got to have 100 people. And they got 100 signatures. And we went for it. I went to the University of Michigan to business school, took a few courses, and we put an ad in the newspaper, in the Jewish News. And it appeared on page 64 of the Jewish News, full-page ad, basically saying what Shir Shalom was going to do. And I took pages out of an old Christian Bible book. And you could still see it in the offices, those pages. And the one that really resonated was Ruth intermarried too, and she'd feel right at home at Shir Shalom. The Orthodox community went berserk. They wrote to the Jewish News, and there were 1,400 letters to the Jewish News condemning that ad. And so they put the ad on page 3 of the Jewish News to show ousted rabbi creates congregation for the intermarried. And then the next week we had 200 new members. So I had to respond to all those letters. Ousted rabbi responds to critics, page 1, with the ad. Got another 100 families the very next week. So from May of 1988 to September of 1988, we went from 30 families to 500 families in a breath of wind. And we outgrew the office building on the first day. So, long story short, the 8th row is the furthest back of this congregation. everything else was supposed to be for something else. That's the social hall, and that was supposed to be, everything in this building is movable parts.
We referred to it in our office as a little Elizabethan theater.
And there you go.
Right.
It's the Avon, you know.
Right? And the Torah procession up and around. And we were embedded, at the office building and then at West Bloomfield High before we ever, were in this building to learn more about how the services went and how things were performed. And then we kept adding little details.
And they were phenomenal details.
Right.
The reason why we got the money from the bank, everybody, is because, I hate to say this, when you got nothing, you take gambles. And the banker said, bring me $200,000 and you too will have a mortgage. But you've got to do it in 3 weeks. So we had a groundbreaking on this building. And we sold each seat for $1,000 and put in your plaque on each seat. And in one, but it had to be Tochasaf and Tish. It had to be on the table. So everybody had to give $1,000 by check for this thing. And I brought in the checks to the banker, and he said, sold. You've got a mortgage. And that's how Shir Shalom was really built, on a wing, on a prayer, and everything else. Somebody asked the question, how did we get the Micah quote? Gentleman in the second row. And the Micah quote was my idea of a mission statement.
Right.
So the English is on this side, the Hebrew is on this side. As you look at it, this is right to left. This is, as I face it, left to right. Next, as you take a look at the ark, you will see the ark has stone all the way into the ark. That stone resonates down over there. It is supposed to be Jerusalem stone, or to imitate the wall. As you see, there are two, what do you call the round?
The bands? The bands of stone?
Not the band, the circular, the half circle thing that you have. Can the camera follow me?
The one that looks like a cylinder.
Yes. Over here you will see this and this. These are bench points that we created. This is the destruction of the first temple. This is the destruction of the second temple. All of this is within the ark. You will see it's also stone in here, and the stone goes up to there because that is tradition. Everything else in white is for us to write. It's blank pages. Story, wonderful story. First year of college, I was in a psychology class, and my professor, Mr. Angelus, had a large sheet of paper, the flow chart kind of paper, and he drew a black circle in the center of the paper, and he colored it in, and he said, "What do you see?" And, we thought it was a Rorschach test. And he said, "Oh, it's a bald head. It's a head of hair." And the next person said, "Oh, it's a map of the world." And the other said, "No, it's the universe." And everybody had a different point of view. And he said, "It's a black dot on a total field of paper. You could write the Declaration of Independence. You could write the first book of the Bible in all of this white space. And you only notice the black dot. And that is why people need psychiatry, because all they see is the black dot. To a worm in horseradish, the whole world is horseradish. Therefore, This is written in white for a reason, because you can write on the whole thing. It's our life as a congregation. Write your story. And it's beautiful. And Kenny, God rest his soul, that's what he taught me. He taught me you could use architecture to have a mission. And the Kabbalah taught me you bury things in your world, in the world you see, to remind yourselves every chance you get of who you are and who you are to be. I will never go back to Bethel. I will never go back to being that kind of rabbi. When you come here, I want your life to be transformed. That is the deal. We make Jews. That's our deal. There are some people who can't take it. Mazel tov. I'll give you different places to go. I'll trade them for future draft choices. Not a problem. If you don't love it here, it's the wrong place for you. If you don't love it where you are, I would rather you go elsewhere. I want you to find your Judaism and what you're comfortable in. That's what this was for. You are not supposed to be comfortable in these seats. And I know you're not going to be comfortable in these seats.
As an anecdote, we did have a debate over whether we put pads in the back or not.
Oh, yes,
And that
I remember
was a long
that debate.
because, we said that's not so comfortable when you're sitting, especially for Yom Kippur, which, you're supposed to suffer a little bit. But should we have padding in the backs?
And that was a Kenny thing. He said, no padding in them.
And then it looks cooler this way, and then, you have a little, it's much better.
He said, again, this is a classic design. And I will tell the board of this congregation and its rabbis, and I have before, you take care of this building, it will take care of you. You let this building go geflacht, guess what? It will not take care of anybody. It will become dated. I was here when Adat Shalom was built. Adat Shalom was a jewel as far as I was concerned when it was built.
Love it.
No question about it. And I think Kenny worked on that building.
No, it was Sol King.
Was that after?
We renovated it. I've been in it. It's pretty cool now.
The nursery school that we are presently in at Adat Shalom was state of the art at the time. But that was 40 years ago. They have not taken care of that nursery school. And in not taking care of the nursery school, it's dated. It feels dated. And you don't do that to a shul. If you don't give what's right, you give what's left. And secondhand stuff is not what a shul is for. According to the Bible, you are to decorate it in gold and silver and fine linens, so that you have a feeling of greatness and goodness, and you feel good when you get here. Gold and silver and fine linens are built within this sanctuary to echo that. Now, I know you've heard me talk about the windows, and I'm sure these windows by Gerhard Nodell. But what you don't see, thanks to Kenny and to Joel, part of the agreement was he was also to do the eternal light. Right? The eternal light echoes the window. Most people don't see that. Nodell took a piece of all of the 18 pieces of glass from each of the windows, and he put them into the eternal light. They're supposed to be symbols of redemption. During the day, you see nothing. You hardly even see the light, because during the day, everything's okay. At night, just as the window in the back goes dead. You don't really see the window unless you're looking when everything is black. And then it reflects all over. And on the eternal light, instead of just the Jewish star that is coming down, you see the Sefirot shadowed on the top of you see the rays of God's light according to Kabbalistic Judaism. And one of these days, just come here at night, take a look up, and you can't miss it. But you've got to know where to look. And there's a white plate up there, and that's where you look. Everything is smoke and mirrors. Look around you at the windows, on the doors. Joel, you want to?
Well, that was our dove, our metaphorical interpretation of the dove, which you see here holding the olive branch. So the half circle and the window cut out of it.
Does everybody know about the logo, the dove? Almost every other congregation uses the building as their logo. I hated that because then you constantly were focusing on just brick and mortar. You've got to recognize what your mission is. And our mission, the half moon of Islam, the menorah of Judaism, the dove of the Holy Ghost of Christianity, that they are all part of us, because this is a house of prayer for all people, no matter who you are. That the Holocaust happened because people didn't realize that they were part of a universe. They thought they were more special than other people. We have to be better than that. And that's why this is throughout the entire building. You go in the parking lot, and you see the lot, and you look at it from the second floor, you will see that it's the logo. And this is what speaks for Shir Shalom. That's why this is a pulpit that the Torah is read on. That is the individual's speech. That doesn't represent the congregation. That only represents whoever is up there's opinion. Does that make sense to everybody? And again, embedded in the congregation, embedded in the building. These two, to this guy's brilliance, come together as in an entire circle, just like the logo. And when you have a wedding here, if the camera can follow me, this little trick over here, this area of space, is where that pulpit moves into as a circle. So you have no pulpit. This closes off, and you can do anything in this room, just as you can do anything in any room of this building. That nothing is totally sacred, that everything is up for grabs. It is all white space. Wait. Brian, are you here somewhere? I think you're...
It's behind the
he's behind
organ.
the curtain. Do we
No,
have
but what
the
you're looking
Kiddush
for is
cup
behind the organ.
anywhere?
You looking for your teeth?
What? I want a drink. No, do we have the Kiddush cup anywhere? Okay. You know, when you rule the world, you can really do anything, except when Bunny Lieberman is president. She really had my number, I will tell you. I couldn't do squat unless I got permission. And that was just, you think I didn't know. Okay. Look familiar? Guess what it is? Exactly. It is the ark. We had this designed. It's the ark. Now, let me show you something. What's the ark supposed to look like, Joel? You
I'm
know?
missing your question.
What's the ark supposed to look like?
I don't get it.
A menorah.
Oh, that whole program, yeah.
Okay? The ark is supposed to look like a menorah, and it's also supposed to be a Torah. If you look at it from left to right, you know, in a Torah, that's the part of the Torah that has already been read. This is the Torah that is yet to be read. What? Switched around. Sorry. Right to left.
Yep.
Okay? This is the Torah that we are going to be reading. That is the Torah that has already been. We've got a lot of places to go. Does that make sense? These are, how many forms of wood? Do you remember?
Oh my
It was
goodness.
acacia. It was all woods from the Bible.
Macquarie, eucalyptus. This is a bright maple, and some of it is clad in gold, by the way. This is written.
So all of this is biblical in nature. It's supposed to be everything that was said in the Bible that belongs in a sanctuary. Mm-hmm. So when you look at this, you are to say to yourself, oh my God, this is real stuff. They weren't kidding when they made a sanctuary. It's not just Jewish stars. As a matter of fact, there are no Jewish stars except for the eternal light, and you can't see it. You've got to be right under it. Because that's not what this is about. This is about symbols. Now, when you go outside, you will see the same thing happening as far as that wall is concerned outside. And there are Yortzeit plaques outside. Those are Yortzeit plaques for our Christian relatives and Christian friends. And the one that's in the middle is the banker who gave us the mortgage. He died 3 years after this building was built. His name was Jerry Schumacher. And to him we owe this building. A nice Christian man. Ask any questions you want. Is there anything else in the bill
There's a couple questions from online.
Okay.
One was to Joel. You said there's a bunch of small details that were in there. Somebody asked what your favorite was.
I love the fact that our two tables nest together and can become a circle.
He made that.
The little, you can see the missing piece over there, and it sticks out here as the receiver, for the return. So that's a pretty cool little put together.
Alyssa?
Has a what? Has an alarm on it, yes. I have set that alarm off many times during a wedding, at the beginning of a wedding.
Repeat the question, too, for online.
Oh, I'm sorry, for online. Temple Bethel has an alarm on its ark. No. We do not. Why? Temple Bethel had a burglary. And so they alarmed the ark. They stole, and this is a sad story, the kids who burgled the place. It was during a blackout. They got through the alarm system. They would have gotten through the alarm system no matter what. But they got through the alarm system. They went to the ark. They took the Torah ornaments out of the ark, and they literally ran over them with trucks.
Ooh.
so that they were flattened and they couldn't be really identified by anybody. And then they brought them in for, to a pawn shop, basically for smelting. A lot of pawn shops, as my friend Les Gold will tell you, are usually manned. The employees are usually off-duty cops. And when they brought them in, the cops knew that these kids shouldn't be having this. And they looked like holy objects, and so they reported it. The kids were caught. 2 of them were Jewish. And things happened to them that shouldn't have happened. All of them are dead. All of them were killed in prison. For what? So Bethel addressed the problem by alarming it and locking the ark. There were many a time I couldn't get into the ark. I didn't have the key, And I would hate to tell you how many times in the beginning of a major wedding that was held at Bethel, I would open the ark, because you open the ark, because they too have a curtain, mechitza, and and the alarm would go off. And, the best weddings you go to are the ones that there are mistakes made, because then you'll remember it forever. Oh, that was the wedding that the alarm. Some man came up to me 2 years ago, 3 years ago. When did Shopping Center Market close on Maple? When did that happen? There's no more Shopping Center Market there. The guy comes up to me at Shopping Center Market and says, Rabbi Schwartz, is that you? I said, yeah. He says, you married my Brittany 25 years ago. I said, really? Do you remember my Brittany? 25 years ago. 25 years ago. I do. She was the one in white. That is why, people don't like me, because I do things like that. I shouldn't do things like that. But it was so much fun to do. At any rate, he watches the video every year. Me, I don't remember anything. So, but I will tell you, whenever there's a wedding that something went wrong at, like the dog who peed on my shoes at one wedding, when Rabbi Syme, may he rest in peace, that's Rabbi Monty Syme, we did a wedding at a country club at a lake, and he stepped back so that I could go, and I went to the mic, and he stepped into the water. And those were the times when rabbis wore robes at weddings, and his robe just came up like this. And he had the best line. He said, I have finally shrunk to Rabbi Schwartz's level. Those are the alarm weddings. I remember those weddings. We didn't put an alarm on this ark. People can come and open the ark. I want them to open the ark. I want them to feel close. If that helps them, Gega's into hate. Somebody wants to steal a Torah, Gega's into hate. And that's another thing. Every Torah has a history. I didn't buy new Torahs. I bought historic Torahs that everybody else had either rejected or were selling or whatever, and I demanded to know the history of everyone, so that a kid could pick out a Torah and could say, that's the Torah I want because that's the history I want. That it had to mean something.
Great segue to the Torah Scroll and why we have a scroll out there, if you
right.
Please, because I have an anecdote when you finish.
The building outside is supposed to look like a Torah Scroll. Kenny and Joel built B'nai Moish. They were the designers of B'nai Moish. And this building sort of echoes it in certain ways. And I said, I want to differentiate, but more important, you know what? This could be a Torah. Can we build on the other side? And Joel, who usually knew what things cost, unlike me and Kenny, said, yeah, for another $3 million, you could do anything you want. And we didn't have the $3 million that it cost to do this one. And so we made it a Megillah.
Exactly.
And I wanted to use the rooms back there where we have only one room. I wanted to make other classrooms. That also couldn't happen because of cost overruns and things like that. This year, hopefully, with Joel's assistance.
Oh, we're off and running right now, and the new edition, well, in plan from the sky, will complete the Torah Scroll.
And we will now be a Torah instead of a Megillah. And hopefully they'll have as much fun with the Purim thing as we had, with the real thing as we had with the Purim thing.
One quick anecdote on the Torah, that the facade of the building, which it never occurred to me, and some things happen for the right reason. If you look at the patterning of the windows on the building, it is the columns of the Torah text. And when the scribes would turn, left and right and make these bodies, you can see the Torah columns reflected in the skin.
And by the way, the Yortzeit plaques that are out there for the intermarried families as well as others who we celebrate their lives with, that's in the Jerusalem stone area. Everything else is blank brick. Also to echo you can write anything. You can do anything you want. Make mistakes. Have fun. Create. Don't just sit there and say, okay, everything comes to me. I hate it. I don't hate very much in this life anymore, but I hate it when other congregations sit on their tuchuses and they say, you come to us. We're a service station. I think you got to go out to your community. I think you have to touch people's lives. Daniel, you got any others online?
A couple more questions from online. One is the table behind you. If you could describe the
table behind us is, you didn't do this, I did that. 4 mothers of Israel. That's supposed to be where our candles are lighted. And it's by a French Jewish artist who in bronze created that image of 4 mothers of Israel holding up a world. And I don't know if they can get a close-up online, but each one of those for the four Rachel, Leah, each one is, it's not the men that hold up Judaism, it's the women. Now, I hate to say this was before any other congregation celebrated women's rights. And it was important, at least to this congregation, that we had women presidents, we had women represented, and our first class of bar mitzvahs was 90% women. Those people who couldn't get bat mitzvah during the time period that women were kind of shunted to the back of the bus. Next.
Can you explain the square rectangular figures on the tapestry that hang above the ark?
The tapestry is composed of 18 different psalms. And it's by Mr. Nodell, who was a fabric artist at Cranbrook, but internationally known. Nodell had me photostat the various pages, both from Torah and their English translation of the 18 Psalms of Redemption. Most notably, Esainai Elehari, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri, was not one of those. It was 23rd Psalm. And by the way, we have somewhere in the files, and he wanted them not to be around, but somewhere in the files we wanted them to us to remember what those redemption psalms were. And he chose the number, and then he put it on glass because he wanted to work in glass. And then he broke the glass of each psalm, and then he reconfigured it because the world is topsy-turvy and that redemption hasn't come to fruition. So in order to redeem the world, we have to see the world as it is broken and as we can put it together. He then created envelopes. Each one of those gold pieces are envelopes that when the sun shines on them during the day, you lose the gold. It becomes a non-color in some way. I mean, he used some kind of gold thread that becomes a non-color. And during the day, all you see are the brightness of the colors that come out at you. At night, and around there are 365 different colors on the window itself to symbolize the 365 days of the year. In the squares, in the quadrants, those are the different seasons of the year. And so during the daytime when all is good and you can see everything so clearly and the windows just shine, all you see are the days of the year. At night, you don't see the days of the year because everything turns to biach. The only thing you see is a light that is trained on that window from that side and from this side. That's why those fresnels are there. And that light shines so that at nighttime it echoes and shadows the lights on either side for the 10 Commandments on one side and the 12 tribes of Israel on the other. Another one?
Gerhard, thank you, Rabbi.
Gerhard Nodell.
Gerhard Nodell was here, I think, 2 years ago, thanks to Marilyn Finkel Brown, who was personal friends and introduced the two of you, I think, right?
Marilyn Finkel Brown is the lady that's in 1, 2, 3rd
Hi,
row,
Marilyn.
and nobody's sitting around her.
So,
What did you say?
Rabbi, so when Gerhard was here, he talked about growing up in California and looking from his window into the ocean and the horizon, and that he wanted to create that looking out into the expanse of, seeing the beauty of a sunset over the ocean, and try to create that with, as you look at the window, and the midpoint is that horizon and above and below, and what you see in our world too, which I thought was a really cool thing that I was not aware of.
The other thing is, when Marilyn introduced me to Gerhard, Marilyn, was Kenny with us when
Yes.
we went? I think he was. Gerhard wanted to know what colors I wanted, and I said, this is my talis. This is what I wear. Can you echo this in some way? That's what that is. It's talis of gold and linen in fine colors. And if you look at it, it's fantastic. A couple of the envelopes, Rabbi Moskowitz, are falling. So, and that happens, by the way. So when you speak to Brian, who's upstairs, would you please tell him to get somebody to fix it? What? What did he say? Did he say it or did you say it? You said it? Okay.
So last night was the first time I've been here at night with the new clear glass skylight.
Gorgeous.
And as the moon was out last night,
You saw it?
I was sitting in my little perch up there. I had a line shot to the moon, and it was just kept me going all night.
Wow.
So the original was obscuring. It was translucent.
Well, it was translucent because
And we are like burning out people's eyeballs, and we now have Temple Shir Shalom sunglasses. But
we're
I
gonna
think it's
have
only for a
to
little
coat
while.
that glass somehow.
It won't stop the glare, but
Really? It didn't stop
we
the
do
glare
need to
even
get-
when we had the translucent thing.
put on Brian's list to clean the glass, though. I'm looking up now.
Well, it was, now again, this was a Joel thing and me, and we yelled at each other for a little bit. I don't think he ever forgave me for the conversation, but I wanted to have a dome.
Right.
And Joel said, "You really don't want a dome?" And I said, "Yeah, I want a dome." He says, "You don't want a dome." And what kind of sound did you say it was? It's going to stick in, it's an echo,
It'll echo worse than this does.
a parabolic effect.
Thank you.
Very good. I taught you well.
Go to
I'm
the African.
forgetting-
Go to the
One of the
African
reasons I'm
American-
not coming back is I'm forgetting things.
Go to the African American Museum downtown. You can really get the effect.
And everything that we say in that dome, you can't hear. It's very difficult for you to hear if we don't have a mic. And when we do have a mic, it echoes. So I was wrong. He may have been right. And, but it's a great effect, number one. Number two, you have to, why the translucent glass? When we were at the office building, the town of West Bloomfield would not let us build a sukkah outdoors. They would not let us build a sukkah because it was a commercial building. And we could not get a variance. They would not let us have a variance. We had to build the sukkah indoors. And according to the traditions, you're supposed to have a sukkah where you can see the moon. You can look through whatever and see the moon. We now have our sukkah in the building to remember to see the moon, and that's why the translucent glass.
We also have a beautiful sukkah outside.
Oh, we also, by the way, the outside was built for a beautiful sukkah as well. It was built with that in mind, that that's what it was. And why isn't the stream running? Is the fountain broken or? Fountain broken?
Brian, another thing to fix.
Oh,
It's
working.
okay. I
We just
just,
need to plug it in.
you know,
Speaking of other things that are working,
other things are working.
Other things that are
That's-
working.
I'm glad you
That's
said
right.
that.
the Kahn family sends their regards, Rabbi Schwartz. Hillary,
they
Shane, Mark,
should.
Bethan.
Would you please tell Mrs. Khan that I have a pigeon for her for Technion?
Hopefully she
That
heard.
I have raised money for Technion yesterday.
Different family.
Oh, a different Khan family.
Different Kahn family.
Which Khan family is this? Is it not Andy and
Hillary,
Larry? Oh.
Shane, Mark, Beth.
Ah,
and
that
Hillary,
Khan family.
fiancé
Give
Kim.
them my love. I didn't raise money for them.
They have a question about the artistic inspiration for the expansion and what's to come for Temple Shir Shalom.
Well,
Project altogether.
This was laid out in the original concept to have the school wing, always.
Always.
So it was always part of the original plan. It looks quite a bit different than the original sketches did, but that was always the plan. So
Yeah, and it doesn't affect parking, and it shouldn't affect parking, and it shouldn't affect anything. We put a grassy area there because that's where the expansion was supposed to be. That's where the original circle was supposed to be. And it was supposed to go down, so now it's going up. It was supposed to go up and down,
up and down.
but,
Again, didn't have enough cash.
but didn't have the money, like everything else, you know. Glad we got what we got.
Had we not put in those fixtures in the lobby, maybe we could have afforded it.
Another thing that Joel and I disagreed about, and then just to tick me off even more, you know, I said, I really love those outside lights. He said to me, I thought for sure when you ordered those outside lights, I thought for sure you were going to cut them out of the project because those are the most expensive lights you can get. I almost killed him. I said, why didn't you tell me then? And the answer was, because I wanted to see your expression now. And there you go.
Yes.
Okay, take your mask off just for this.
Okay, so originally, if I recall, that grassy area where we hold service under the stars and where the construction's going to be, was going to actually have classrooms below with glass blockers and stuff.
Exactly. Unfortunately, as Joel will tell you, under this area, right here, and that area, we have a natural spring. And it floods. And as you can see, the entire property is all coming downhill. So not only does it flood, whenever it rains, it really floods and goes all the way to the back of the property where we have a drainage ditch.
Pond, whatever you
Pond, whatever you call it. And now it's filled with grass, but when it fills. And it would have cost us far more to go down than we could ever anticipate. So we did not do it then. And because we did not do it then, including the elevator dropping to the next floor, we can't do it now. It would be cost prohibitive. So, and the windows and the driving over the windows was my idea. And again, Joel said, it really doesn't work. And he may be right on that one too.
That's twice already. Right?
Twice?
Maybe right is a different.
Okay.
Being right and might be right are two different things in Schwartzville.
That's what happens when we put two New York Jews together to put this,
Isn't that nice?
right?
But the elevator is there for the new addition, as is the cut-through, which is the window right next
Right.
to the
The
elevator.
window is supposed to be the door.
We're prepped and ready to go, so we're almost finished drawing. We had the surveyors were out yesterday to make sure all of our water issues will be solved, and we'll head to the township, and God willing, we'll be cooking along on this thing very soon.
And Bonnie, to the question that you didn't ask, I will answer it. I have made a promise to Rabbi Moskowitz that I will raise the money and give money to pay off the mortgage before that building, before a shovel hits the ground. I do not want to have caused this congregation any debt. So we will be debt-free, and that is my promise. But those of you, everybody, who have heard that promise, know that I'm coming to get you.
I didn't want to warn them, but yes, take his phone calls.
Please.
Well, it's nice, people are watching online who have been a part of Temple, some in town, but some, on the West Coast, some in Hawaii, and feel even more, the line is, I feel even more connected to Temple knowing about why it was made this way and constructed this way, and seeing the outward beauty of it, but now appreciating it from inside too. So I'm glad we could do this, and I appreciate both of your time. We appreciate both of your time. Joel, of giving some of your holiday. You usually don't have to work today, so we had to, put you on the spot. Rabbi, for working today and being on the bima with us.
But
means a lot.
I'm in a world now where I don't know what a weekend is anymore, so it's
Well, guess what? We do. So, and we work weekends, so, but thank you. So, and obviously, Rabbi and Joel are available too, and we always can send them questions and stuff, and we have the information too. We're looking forward to what we create in our new space, and the art there, and the beauty there as well. There's a lot of treasures that will be part of what we create, and there's going to be a new sacred space that we can have for some intimate meditation services. One reality we found during the pandemic is that people love the 6:30 service. And, during the year we do 6:30 services and we get 30 people, 40 people in person. And online we have 230 and 250 people at our services. And we have these Friday night bar mitzvahs at 7:30. So how do you do both those things together? And it's a challenge. And we're not always able to. So with an additional sacred space, we can do that. We can do a 6:30 service, both, in person and virtually, and at 7:30 walk right into a bar mitzvah as well. Why we have Friday night bar mitzvahs? Why is that a Detroit thing? I'm a transplant. I've only been here 26, 27 years. But we inherited that, and that's okay if that's what people want.
We did inherit it.
Yeah.
And to us, we made a promise because there's another institution down the block a little who has multiple bar mitzvahs at the same time. We did it at Bethel as well. And I had made a promise in the very beginning that no one would have a double bar mitzvah involuntarily. That was the Shir Shalom promise. And nobody has. And that's because we can do a Friday night, a Saturday morning, and God help us, yes, even a Havdalah.
But the Havdalah service is for us, and we do those a few a year. Part of the beauty of bar and bat mitzvah is it's a normal service, and our children are learning they're responsible for the service. It's not just a show, as a Havdalah sometimes can be, because we wouldn't normally have that 5 or 6 o'clock service there too.
But it was part of our DNA as well.
I did torture my children in teaching them that mission. My twin sons, after their older sister's bat mitzvah, they thought, wow, we have both of us at the same time. We only have to do half the service. We get off a little easy. I said, no. You know the rule. Rabbi Schwartz said there's no double b'nai mitzvah here. Asher, you're Friday night. Nathan, you're Saturday morning. I'm the rabbi. We have the whole weekend. And they were angry for about a day and then realized I wasn't going to do it to them. So I wasn't going to do it to me.
Yeah, it's just a shame that, little Schwartz over there didn't follow the tradition of twins.
Irish twins, right?
But still, there's time.
Still is time. Johanna, are you listening to this?
Yeah, Meryl.
You mentioned the woods that are mentioned in the Bible. You mentioned the gold and the silver. Where's the lapis lazuli?
Lapis lazuli, the windows. If you take a look at the windows and you take a look at the eternal light, and you'll see lapis lazuli. It has the clamshell, the oyster shell look. The iridescence. Yes. But yes, we literally went through the Bible and we went down the various things and said, how do we incorporate all of these things? I mean, it was fun to do. It was a yuck. That was all it was. And again, part of Kabbalah is that you're supposed to take a look at something. And you're supposed to say, that's one side of it. What's underneath? What's the real thing? And then you're supposed to get underneath that and see, oh my God, there's this too. There's not that everything is solvable. Every problem has a solution. You just have to look enough and you have to be part of it enough to find it. God is whispering in your ear. You just have to slow down to the speed of life to listen. And most of us are on autopilot. Most of us are just moving along and we don't see any of it. And it's there. That's what this temple was supposed to be in the first place. Yamasaki, and people at Bethel are going to hate me for this. Minoru Yamasaki, who, I'm sorry, you could go.
Don't be silly. I'm totally entertained.
Minoru Yamasaki designed Bethel, and Bethel didn't pay him at the end of the contract. And so, but part of his contract was to design the ark. And so he did. Take a look at Bethel's ark in quite a sexual way. And then take a look at the eternal light in quite a sexual way. And then you will see that in effect, Minoru Yamasaki has screwed Temple Bethel.
On that note, we'll continue our question. We'll continue our Tish. I'm going to let Joel off the bima, but I thank him for his time, and we will join. So thank you, Joel. Appreciate it very much.
Joel, thank you. I really appreciate it.
So we'll continue our Tish where you can ask any question you want about Jewish law or lore, whatever's on your minds, and we'll go. So, Robert? Why no Haftorah today? We streamlined the service. So we purposely took out the Haftorah, focusing on Torah, because we want to make our service a little bit briefer, knowing people are online. You know,
certain prayers were not said, certain things were not
right.
done.
So it was intentional, and we did that last year as well. Now, this afternoon, something cool. The Mincha service in the afternoon is always it's a strange service. And it's part of the sacrificial, the sacrifice of it. And it often isn't a service I personally find meaningful, and I've always wanted to try different things with it. And so I saw a musician was commissioned to write a musical number about the story of Jonah.
That's what Susan...
A midrash. His name is Theo Kandel. And Cantor is going to sing that song instead of doing Haftarah, instead of us reading the Jonah story. It's called Big Fish. And it's about repentance, and I'm excited for her to do that, share that with us too. Haftarah is an interesting holdover of ancient times in a sense. A generation ago or 50 years ago, we weren't allowed to read Torah, a bar bat mitzvah, because if you make a mistake, it has to be correct. I remember going to Orthodox synagogue as a child, my friend's synagogue, and her little brother made a mistake, and the rabbi would sit in the back just like this during Torah, and then you make a mistake, and he screams out the right word, right?
Kind of like Bubba back there.
What's that?
It's like Bubba.
Right, and screams out the correct word. He's sleeping, don't bother him.
He's not sleeping.
And the bar mitzvah boy, scared out of his pants, and that's not right. I don't want to ever do that. But Torah is the roots of our Judaism, so we've always wanted our kids to do Torah and focus on that. Why do we read Haftarah in the first place? Haftarah it's not the same word as Torah. It's a tet instead of a tav.
And it doesn't mean half Torah either.
It means additional, right? And the idea was there are additional readings that in some thematic way line up with the Torah portion. Why are we doing it? The real reason is probably we weren't reading these parts of the Bible, and the rabbis were afraid, 1,500 years ago, that 1,800 years ago, we wouldn't read them. And we'd forget about, the story of Jonah. We'd forget about Isaiah. We wanted to teach this, so they wove them in. The Midrashic way of looking at it is during the Roman period, reading Torah was illegal. And so the rabbis found a sneaky backdoor way to teach Torah by finding Haftarah portions with themes that resonated. And so it was a nice way to do it. But even with our kids, we focus much less on our Haftarah than our Torah. And in looking at the service, we thought, it's okay to do it this way. Did you miss it? Okay, good. Bruce? Why is Yizkor only recited a few times a year? 4 times we do Yizkor, right? The 4 main services, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. And Yizkor was actually a census. And those are the times, traditionally in Torah, you be in Jerusalem. You have to go to Jerusalem to make your offering to pay your taxes. And guess what? If you didn't show up, you didn't either pay your taxes or you had died. So we check on who's there. And literally was a counting of who's there. And so we give a roll call and say, these people are free from bringing their offering because they passed away. We made it something spiritual over time. And we say the memorial prayer, the Yizkor prayer. We add to it the prayer we say at funerals, MLA, asking God to protect the souls of those we love. And that's why tradition is that only a mourner is obligated to go to a Yizkor service.
I know.
I don't know about you, but as a child, my parents wouldn't want me coming to Yizkor services. I would always be, excused and not in the synagogue. I would often be waiting out in the hallway or playing with my friends, and I could come back in for Niyah. But you wouldn't go. Now, some synagogues do Yizkor in the morning, actually. Right? I think Shir Zedek does their Yizkor in the morning.
In the morning.
I believe. So I grew up Reform, but Yizkor was always the afternoon.
Yeah, you're right. Very good. Everybody, I want to make a special pause. Melanie, my Melanie, is in the back, and I just want to say to her in front of all of you, Melanie has left our employ, and she was my mainstay for years upon years. How many years, Melanie? And she made my life very livable for all those years. And she ran this congregation very well. And I just want to thank her at this important time of the year and tell her how much she meant to me. So thank you, love. Yes, Gary.
Last night, my wife and I were watching live streaming, and you pointed at someone and said that you introduced me to Susie. My wife looked over at me and said, who introduced Daniel to Susie? And I said, even as VP of programming, I did not. But you should ask tomorrow, and Stacey tried to ask the question.
So the question for those who are online is Gary Schumann, our Vice President of Programming, his wife Stacy, last night after watching the service, or while watching the service, Rabbi Schwartz pointed into the congregation and said, you introduced me to my wife Susie and made his life. Who is that individual that you were pointing to?
Number one, a story. I was dating another lady at the time, and my kids did not like her. My kids did not like her to the point that they literally put an ad out to all of my friends and said, find somebody else. Because I dated her for 2 years, and they were afraid she was going to become their stepmother, and that would be tantamount to death by a million needles. So a friend of ours took me out for my birthday every year, Bernie and Muriel Morey. And on February 9th every year, everybody, you could send presents. That's okay, February 9th. And every year, I'd go out to a birthday celebration with them. And they and my children literally schemed. There was a restaurant in town that was new. My wife was taking a year off. She was, let's just call her the production editor of Time magazine, because that would be the easiest way of describing her position there. And her brother had a restaurant in town by the name of Romanix. For those of you who might remember Romanix, and he was opening up a new restaurant called Home Sweet Home, and that was in Novi. And he said to my wife, as she was divorcing her husband, she was going to take a year's leave of absence from Time to get away, and she opened up basically Home Sweet Home for my brother-in-law and went into the restaurant business instead of the printing business. I went to the birthday celebration at Home Sweet Home because they had plotted. And they had plotted with Susie. We want you to meet a rabbi, our rabbi, he's single, I think you'll love him, yada, yada, da-da-da-da. And she said, I'll sit with you at dinner. I'll get you the table, yada, yada. And sure enough, I came in with the other lady. This did not work out well. But for those of you who have been to dinner with me and know, at that time in Detroit, I was a figure who was, a local small market figure. And I had just gotten fired, so I was now even infamous figure. I worked the restaurant. And, when a new restaurant opens, the Yidden are the first to go there. And so I worked the tables. The lady went up to the lady I was dating went up to the table, and I worked the tables. And, so that I would know where the table was, Susie came with me. And she carried a water pitcher, and I just went to every table. And we seemed to know all the same people because these people became regulars at this new restaurant. and I'm hitting this table and that table, and 40 minutes later we both get up there. But we had a pattern worked out between us. You know, oh, you know this one, that one, this one's this way, this one's, do you know the story about that kind of a thing? And anyway, we go up to the table, and there that lady is, and she is not happy. She had a sixth sense about this, that something was wrong in this equation. And Susie did not sit down at the table, but she was a butterfly and worked it around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I came home that night, and my sons asked me, so how was your birthday party? And I said, it was lovely. He said, you meet anybody? I says, no. He says, who was at the dinner? And I told them. He said, was it a good restaurant? I said, it was a wonderful restaurant. He says, we want to go. And so they took me to dinner with Susie. And they didn't know who Susie was, and one of them tried to pick her up. And when Susie said, are you Rabbi Schwartz's son? He says, yes, I'm Peter. And she said to him, you know, you're making a pass at me. I'm old enough to be your mother. He says, are you Susie? He said, yes. He said, would you like to apply for the job? I swear to God, that's what the kid said. I had kept telling this other lady that I couldn't get married, I wouldn't get married, and that went on for 2 years. I was married to Susie in 6 months. And it was because Muriel Morey introduced us. And Bernie Morey, may he rest in peace, who died on his 100th birthday, was one of the sweetest men I ever knew in my entire life. He was the one who got us a banker. And he was the one who made sure the banker did it on my signature. And as bankers know, that's not easy to do with an unemployed rabbi. That's why bankers get into trouble so often. Any other question?
Linda?
So I'm following along in the gates of repentance, and I notice sometimes you use a different word for God than what's in the book, and then also I know you skip some pages. So I'm just wondering, like, how you decide, you know, which words to leave in, which to skip.
So the question for those online is, during the service, Linda noticed that we used different words for God, and that we also skipped different prayers throughout the service today, throughout all of the high holidays as we were doing things. And I'll share that the three of us actually all of us have the gates of repentance. We all have different editions of the gates of repentance. Which is
so much
representative
fun.
and emblematic of the congregation as well, as people have acquired them and as we've sold them in the office. It has to do with, at one point, I don't remember what year it was, but the Union for Reform Judaism, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, said we're going to make our prayer book more egalitarian. One including women. Rabbi Schwartz described the table that was up here and the important role of women in Judaism that wasn't recognized. And the Reform movement said we're going to recognize the role of our matriarchs as well. And then over time, removing the masculine language of God and making it more amorphous so that we could see God as gender fluid. And so the language that we see represents that. So my prayer book for Avinu Malkeinu, for example, didn't know how to deal with it, so it left it in the Hebrew, says Avinu Malkeinu, whereas Rabbi Schwartz the elder says our Father, our King, which is the translation of Avinu Malkeinu.
Which we've always just said, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, and rabbis not gone with his translation. But now we've decided that no matter what, we'll always say Avinu Malkeinu, which of course threw some off this morning because we didn't discuss it beforehand.
Just a little thing. But then again,
Because you haven't been on the Bima for...
I do the Kaddish to this day in Ashkenazic Hebrew. It's an Aramaic prayer, and it was translated from the Aramaic into the Hebrew to begin. I mean, it is Hebrew, but it was supposed to be, Ashkenazic Hebrew. That was the sound of it, supposedly. And the Sephardic Hebrew took over, and I got caught in between. I was taught Ashkenazic Hebrew as a child. I was brought up in a Hasidic community from first grade, from kindergarten, nursery school, for 3 years. I'm a Breuer Chassid, which means I'm a German Jewish Chassid. And you could take the boy out of New York, but you can never take the New York out of the boy. And so that's my underpinnings, and have always been my underpinnings. One day the Breuer Rebbe got up and he said, anybody who supports the state of Israel is worse than the Goyim. My father's partner in business was a non-Jew. My father's family was killed, for the most part, in Hamburg, Germany. My father's other uncles and aunts went to Israel, and he supported the state of Israel. He got up, and he, as he calls it, he voted with his feet. He walked out. The next day, the tzitzis that I wore were gone. The dishes were all combined. No more milchik, no more fleishik. And we went to a place called the Stephen Wise Free Synagogue, because he was the only rabbi in the city of New York that was a Zionist. And my father had to get used to hearing a French horn instead of a shofar. And he had to get used to a plate being passed around every Friday, and Friday services, and the book opening from left to right and not right to left. Every time he had to open a siddur, every time he had to open the prayer book, he would go, but he would take it because it was belief. And my papa was a believer. He used to go to his shul with his best friend, Mo, to an Orthodox shul every day before work. Mo was a socialist and Mo was an atheist. And I used to say, Uncle Mo, tell me, why you go to shul? He says, I go to shul because your father believes in God. I go to shul and he goes to speak to God. I go there to speak to your father. You go to shul for different reasons, but you go to shul. And I go to shul to speak to my father. Every day I go to shul, I go to speak to my father. God is a different story. I can talk to him anytime. He never answers back. But my father always does.
A couple online questions that we have, and we didn't do this at the beginning for our online people, but there's 101 screens that are on there. So just like Mark and Laurel said hello, feel free to say hello and tell us where you're watching from today. But a couple questions. The first one directed to Rabbi Schwartz, the elder. What do you think about an afterlife?
What do I think about an afterlife? Again, I know of 36 different concepts of afterlife according to Jewish tradition. Anytime you have 36 different concepts of afterlife, you've got to understand there's no one consistent form of afterlife that all Jews believe in. I'm a mystic. I'm a fakakta mystic, but I'm a mystic. I believe in the reincarnation of the soul. I believe you do this life until you get it right. I want you all to close your eyes. I want you all just to listen to what you are hearing. Now, it might be a hearing disorder, it might not be, but I'm hearing a slight ringing. I believe and that is the power of people and souls who have made it, who are whispering in our ears, who don't need anything but the power of just being. When we die, we meet those people who are part of life. And sometimes you meet people who are old souls that you think you've known before. You ever see a child go up to somebody and just hug them and just love them up? People they have never met, and other people the same child will just run away from. I believe there's something to that. I believe they have met them before. And I believe that you try to instill within yourself a sense of goodness, of love, and of depth every day of your life. And if you can get over the pettiness, and you can get over the anger, and you can get over all the stuff of life, because the stuff of life is just stuff, and you can reach a certain level, then you have moved up a rung. And it's like graduating. It's a person who is still in grade school and somebody who's in Harvard. And you're in a different rung of life. And as you move through it, you become more and better and older and sweeter. And the stuff doesn't mean that much. And it's not about getting, it's giving away. And you find that when you give away, you get more. It's an amazing thing. And that to me brings you to that sound. When you love somebody and you really love them, and I don't mean falling in love, I mean staying in love. And you have something wonderful to tell them. There's a pinnacle of that where you know that he knows, that you know, that he knows. And you don't have to say anything. It's there. That's power. That's wonder. That's awe. All in one. That's where you want to reach. And when it gets to here, and you start to hear those wonderful things that you must do, and you must hear, and you must be, it directs you. You find centerness. Makes you an old soul. And that's your mission. And that's afterlife. Or not. You choose. You want to be part of the earth, and that's it? Wonderful. There's a Jewish belief for that. You believe there's a yeshiva hamala where you're going to study with God? Wonderful. There's a belief for that. Resurrection is a Jewish belief that we stole from somewhere, but it's a Jewish belief. You think the Christians thought of that first? Maimonides says that if you don't believe in resurrection, you're not really Jewish.
Physical resurrection. Physical resurrection.
Physical resurrection.
That we're going to rise in the grave and walk with the Messiah to Jerusalem.
Then when you get up and walk to the mountain of the...
All of us together.
All right.
And that's why, many of our laws of burial and funerals are based on that belief that we need our body to physically rise from the grave and to walk with the Messiah to Jerusalem. And so if we're cremated or not buried appropriately, we wouldn't be a part of that.
Even at a bris.
I don't believe.
By the way, you're supposed to bury the foreskin, the
Bury anything, an amputee.
bury
anything
everything.
that's-
If you have an amputation, you're supposed to bury that.
Because I'm really looking forward to that reunion with my foreskin. So there's a party.
There's a wonderful story.
Don't go on that one.
I'm going on that one. Mr. Cohn,
The story of my
who
breasts.
is,
My parents told you?
who's a ribbon salesman. Do you know that? Does anybody know that story? A ribbon salesman? Man who's a ribbon salesman goes to see Smith in Massachusetts, who is an anti-Semite. And he says, Mr. Smith, I've been in this business now for 40 years. I visited you for 40 years. You haven't bought any ribbon from me. I would feel it to be a personal thing. You can buy any amount. I will deliver it tomorrow. And he says, okay, Cohn, I'll tell you what. I want as much ribbon as it takes to get from the top of your nose to the tip of your penis. Mr. Smith, I consider this a victory, so thank you very much. Next day, 40 trucks come into Smith's parking lot. He calls out, he says, Cohn, you stinking Jew, how could you lied to me? He says, no, I didn't. He says, there are 40 trucks here. He says, yeah, you told me. I told you from the top of your nose to the tip of your penis. He said, yeah, the tip of my penis is buried somewhere in Russia.
It's a true story, right?
Comic relief. For those of you online who are now shutting down because
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, right? Yes.
I still have time. Yes.
Dory?
You have so many great stories. I would suggest that The Last Schnapps would be a great title for a book.
It would be, but it's going to have to be written. I'm writing a screenplay right now. It's got to be after that. The Last Schnapps. Would be, those of you who's joining us for The Last Schnapps. That's good. Good.
I prefer to call it the last Lagavulin.
The last one?
The last Lagavulin.
Lagavulin, right.
Can we clarify something? Because there have been some questions, speaking of these lasts, in your sermon last night.
You're healthy.
I'm healthy.
You're fine.
I'm wealthy. I am not so wise anymore. And again, if I can't, I have seen Rabbi Syme of blessed memory. I have seen Rabbi Hertz, kind of blessed memory. I have seen Rabbi Groner of blessed memory. I have seen Ernst Conrad of blessed memory and many others. Rabbi Fromm as well. You know, all of these people stayed a little too long at the fair. As far as I saw, they did not leave at their peak. They left on a downward trend. I want you to not cry because it's over. I want you to smile because it's happened. And I want you to feel that, you know, I don't want to be a grouchy old guy. I want to be a rabbi who you'll remember forever, who hopefully touched your lives, and not the guy who walks around like something's wrong or forgets your name or doesn't do it really right. I find myself, you know, my face is a little paralyzed from the Bell's palsy. And I've never fully recovered from it. And I can't speak as well as I used to speak. I don't know if that's going to get worse or not. It's harder, it gets harder and harder when you write less and less sermons to write a sermon. And I turn around and I say, you know what, I'm not as patient anymore. I look out at bar mitzvah kids and I say, that's nice, but I'm not in their lives anymore. And these guys are so good. They are really, really good. And they've gotten so much better than me at so many things. And let them have the chance. They are loved by you. And they don't need me anymore. And it's nice to be wanted. and I want them to keep wanting me, but I don't need it anymore either. I adore my wife, adore her. I love being home with her all the time. All the time.
She feels differently, but
Well, she feels that she married me for better or for worse, but not to come home for lunch. When I left last Saturday, I traveled by van because I don't trust the planes. I don't want to be in a tube with 300 of my nearest and dearest sharing a bathroom with them. I just don't in this day and age. So I RV it down here. And it takes me 8 hours a day to get from Maine to here. And I visited the Seneca Nation on one night, and I stayed by a lake, and it was absolutely lovely. And I came down, passing through Cleveland, going up to Detroit, and my wife, of course, when I left, says, "You know, Daniel, you're not the best driver in the world." And I said, "Yes, I know this." And she said, "So would you do me a favor?" I said, "What?" "Can you give me Kaufman's number? Just so that she knows where everything is. You know, she just, for the funeral. And do you want to be cremated, or do you want to just..." I said, "You don't trust me going down there?" She says, "Trust you going down there? I don't think you're coming back." I'm really not a good driver, and certainly not alone. But
It's good that he spent like 2 hours a day on the phone with me as he's driving too.
I did. And as I look around the building, I'm going to spend another 2 hours on my way back with him because he's not looking.
You said you weren't going to do this, though. You said, you didn't want to be the grumpy guy who was complaining about how things
That's
were.
to them, not to you.
Oh, I'm really busy. Daniel is happy to take your call.
Daniel will listen to me. Yes.
That's it.
I need you to take, just for a second. Good.
So the question was, when you hear names on Mishiberach and you're surprised to learn of a name, hear of a name, and is it okay, is it appropriate to reach out to them? We don't automatically put a name on the Mishiberach list. There are a lot of people who we know of who ask not to be on that list, and I sort of have a private list that I say as well that's not for public. So in asking, when we learn someone's ill or going through something, and it's an announcement. I believe that's what is God a puppet master who is going to say, "Ooh, enough synagogues, enough rabbis mentioned that name, I'm going to heal that person"? That's not my belief, right? The idea of Mishiberach is, look, when we don't know what to do sometimes, prayer is the response. I didn't grow up with prayer as a vehicle for solace or as a way to help. Right? My Judaism wasn't spiritual growing up. It was Israel social action community, right? It was, and those were all really celebrated beautifully, but it wasn't prayer. And I remember first being a rabbi in a hospital and not knowing what to do. And so I asked, the person I was visiting, "Would you like me to pray? Would you like to pray together?" And they said yes. And then I'm like, "Oh crap, now what do I do?" So, but I turned to the Mishiberach, and they were very appreciative. And I realized, when we're not sure what to do, prayer helps. And, you've heard me tell the story about my twin sons when they were born in the NICU for those 9 weeks, and the Catholic nurse who found out I was a rabbi, even though I said I'm just dad, she made me pray, right? And it became something really important as we were there with those boys. Did that heal them? It was just a way to bring people together and to give strength. And I don't have the answers. I don't know. So I think when, yes, you hear a name there, so you weren't, that they know their name is being read, and it's okay to reach out to someone.
Our tradition is that we're supposed to visit the sick, that every time we visit a sick person, that we take away 1/60th of their illness. Not each time, but 1/60th of what's there. So we can't heal somebody in that way. So that phone call that you make, or the knock on the door, or the meal that you bring over, it helps. And I think that's one of the other reasons for listing a name on the Mishberach, in addition to those prayers, is so that our community can respond in a way that's helpful too.
We also respect people's privacy. Not everyone wants, it's natural for us when we hear someone's in the hospital to get to that hospital. It's been so strange these past 18 months not going to hospitals. And now we're beginning to, and then Delta came and we couldn't again. That's who we are, to be by someone's bedside. But not everyone wants that. Some are embarrassed, don't like that. My wife, for one, she's very private. She does not want, she's not how she wants to be seen, doesn't want to be visited. And I remember she was once in the hospital. I don't know if it was when she got her hip replaced or she was sick. And it was when the word gets out, because we used to get fax from Beaumont Hospital with all the Jewish patients.
Because I was a chaplain at Beaumont.
But other
we
rabbis
used to get their fax.
Other rabbis would get it too, and
Well, not after Hitler.
so everyone was visiting Leslie, right? Harold Loss was there, and Joey Krakoff was there, and Paul Yedwab was there, and John. Everyone was seeing her, and by the end she's like, enough. And there was an Orthodox rabbi who was on the staff there. And he would chuckle on with his walker and make rounds. And I realized it was Thursday. I knew it was his day. And she was finally feeling better. And she said, can you go down and get me some food, get me real food, whatever. And I see him coming down the hall. And I said, oh, this is not going to end well. So I said to the nurse, I said, can you make sure my wife does not like rabbis. Do not let this rabbi come. So they put up a sign, patients sleeping. He still tried to go in there. They stopped him, fine. So I tell Rabbi Daniel the story. And so he shows up the next morning with a black beard on and payas and a black hat with Shabbat candlesticks. And he goes, darling, I have your candlesticks here. We make the wrong. And it took Leslie a little bit to realize. She appreciated that one. So, but we respect it. That's not everyone, but that's why we're here.
For those online, we were taught by Rabbi Buddy Friedman, or at least I was, that you keep a list in your wallet of the names of those people who you are praying for as a rabbi, and for a Kaddish list of those people you're praying for the year. And I have 2 lists. They're on an envelope. Inside an envelope on either side. And I add to that list. And people who want a rabbi to pray for them will call the rabbi and will say, I want this, but not on the public Bishop Barak list. And so that's how we do this. So I am making an announcement to you, to all of you online, all of you here. There are some of you, this is what we do for a life. I need your pain. I do. I want to absorb 1/60th of your pain. Let me do that. And I want to talk to you. I want to know from you. He wants to know from you. He wants to know from you. We are not mind readers. We cannot read ESP. It does not work. You want us to pray for a relative of yours who has died for the year, we'll do that. We say Kaddish anyway. You say the Mishaberach anyway. So that's what it's for. If they put it on the list, they want you to call. And whatever you do for them, bless you. Bless you. Because that's what we're made for.
I'll add one other tradition that we have at Temple that sometimes people don't want their names read publicly, also not privately, and so we use Hebrew names. And there are a number, if you were listening to the Hebrew names, that most people don't recognize those, and so we're able to use those names, and that way it's a private, public way of doing it. Carl?
This is probably very simplistic after all this good philosophy. But I'm wondering what the definition is between shul, synagogue, and a temple. What differentiates them? Is it just for
I could take this. What differentiates a shul from a synagogue from a temple? Originally, the word shul was a way of temples to be built in Germany. You would not be able to build a synagogue, a temple, in Berlin, in Hamburg, in any major city. So in order to cheat the czar, so to speak, what they did was they built a school. The word for school in German is a Schul. And so the word shul became synonymous with synagogue. So the difference between a shul and a synagogue, it was just where you came from, that's all. And they used to say, at least in Detroit, a shul is an Orthodox place. Norschkeit, that, not true. Next, synagogue. Synagogue was basically is a Greek word that meant like synergy, a place of meeting. There's a threefold purpose for a synagogue. Rabbi Schwartz, a house of
meeting, house of prayer, and a house of study.
Voila. Okay? And a synagogue was invented after Babylonia. During the Babylonian exile, Jews no longer had the temple to sacrifice in. And so because it was forbidden by the Kohanut to sacrifice anywhere but Jerusalem. It was job security for them, but they made it a rule, thank God. And so there was no real priesthood in Babylonia. And so you had people meeting, and scribes led those meetings in synagogues, where they would which was a gathering place for those things. To remember what Judah was like, to remember a Jewish tradition, to write it down, yada, yada, yada. Just jump in anywhere you want here, guys. Last but not least.
Great.
Thank you.
I'll pick up, I'll back clean up.
The temple. In Jerusalem, there was a temple. The temple was built by King Solomon. King Solomon's temple went from generation to generation until the Babylonians came along and destroyed it. Then it was rebuilt during the time period during the time period of the
Ezra and Nehemiah.
Ezra the scribe and Nehemiah. And that was during the time of the Persians. And the Persians came in and they did their thing, and then they were beaten by the Greeks. And again, the temple is now rebuilt. There are sacrifices done in the temple, and then the Romans destroyed the temple. And the rabbis who then led Judaism from the destruction onward, they were the ones who said, no more Hebrew, because Hebrew was a holy language. You speak Aramaic or you speak a patois. Jews went from Judea to other lands, and they went to two major centers. The first was Germany. Germany in Hebrew was called Ashkenaz, and therefore you had Ashkenazic Jews, and the second was Spain, and that is Sephardic. Spain is Sephard, and therefore you have Sephardic Jews, but no more temple. It was only a synagogue. Reform Judaism comes along and says, Narshkeit. They don't really say Narshkeit. They didn't like Yiddish. And they said, nonsense. We can make temples. We are reestablishing the new temple. And every temple will, every Reform institution will not be called a synagogue. We're going to call it a temple. And that is where the word temple comes from. But now, it used to be Shul was Orthodox, synagogue was conservative, and a Reform was a temple, and in this town, it was sacrosanct. When you talked about Bethel, it was Temple Bethel. And now you talk about Temple Israel, there are people at Temple Israel who say temple. They don't even say the temple. They say, I'm going to temple, and that's Temple Israel. You know that that's Temple Israel. Everybody knows that's Temple Israel. Us, you say, I'm going to that place. I'm going Dorton. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing.
We call our place here a synagogue. We call it a temple, congregation.
I keep
shul.
calling it a shul.
So they're interchangeable for us, and it's not that they're so strict in that.
Whatever floats your boat.
Right. But the idea of, Reform Judaism said, we don't want to build a temple in Jerusalem. Our home is right here. We can make our temple. Judaism changed. Our prayers, we took the prayers out that ask for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. We don't need that, was the philosophy. That's why the early reformers were not Zionist.
I don't know about you people, and I don't know about you, and I don't know when
2:30 is when we do our meditation service here.
You have some
But
questions
you are-
online, too.
Oh, you have another question?
And then 3 o'clock is
Do you have a
our...
question for me? Because my face is falling, and I'll answer one question, and then I'm going to go to... I'm
Do you
going to
think-
take my nap.
There's one for you that says, what about animals? Do you think dogs have a soul?
Mine do. I mean, I love my dogs. I mean, they have more of a soul than I do. I mean, I adore my dogs. I mean, so do they have a soul? Of course. I connect with their soul every day of my life. As a matter of fact, they wake me up every morning and they're not even here. So the answer is, why shouldn't dogs have a soul? Now, just like there are some people who I am sure do not have a heart. Doctors I know, on their charts outside, they used to put charts outside the rooms, and I swear they would say SOB, and I knew it was short of breath, but I constantly thought that it was something else. Again, do people have souls? Some people don't. The American Indian has this thing about your soul is a spirit, but it's like a sharp, thing that goes around, and whenever you do something wrong, it hits your heart. And there are some people who it goes around so much and hitting so much that it no longer is a pointed instrument. It's now just a circle that just goes around, and they don't feel the hurt anymore. That's a person with no soul. And I've met those people. I know those people. And that's okay. But
I would argue.
you'd argue?
Yes.
Everybody has a soul?
Yes. It's just
Everybody
that some
has-
people
Wait,
suppress.
wait. Everybody has the potential for a soul.
They suppress their soul. They don't let their soul out.
Well,
It's
and
still there.
So do they have a soul? Do bears poop in the woods? The answer is yeah, I think they do. I'm pretty sure they do. When did they do it? I have no idea. Do these people have a soul? Yeah.
They don't let it out.
You got to really look.
It's just like we each have the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara.
Yeah, but the Yetzer Hara is sexual. I'm sorry.
No, it's not.
Yes.
I mean, sexuality, our sexual drive comes from the Yetzer Hara, but that's not the first and foremost thing.
But
of
it's
the
not
Yetzer Hara.
a bad thing.
No, it's not bad.
Everybody has
I didn't
one.
say it was bad. I said these both exist. The Yetzer Tov. Some people have. You would say some people are pure evil and have no. There's nothing good. But I'd say the Yetzer
No,
Tov
I
still
don't think
exists.
they're people who are without soul or evil. I just think they don't have a conscience.
Okay, but I'm saying the soul is still there. It's just suppressed.
Okay, they don't have a conscience.
Okay.
Fartig.
I believe, as I said, that each of us is created with a soul.
You may be right.
Thank you very much.
Next, before I, yes.
I got a question. Can you give us a perspective, a view? What is Israel, Palestine, Gaza going to look like in 10 to 20 years?
Oh, God. The question is from Mr. Stewart Bass, what will Israel and Palestine look like in 10 years, 20 years from now? If our views, our perspective of that.
The same. Unfortunately.
Again, unless there's catastrophe, the same. Unless I love Israel. I love Israel. Don't always like Israelis, but I love Israel. But I love America, and I don't like Americans these days, a lot of them, because I think that the media has and the internet has separated us. We're becoming non-Americans. We're becoming something else, and it's a disaster. I don't know, and my opinion is just as good as anybody else's. What would I like to see? I would love to see a two-state solution. That's what I would like to see. What would I like to see? I would love to see, everybody cooperating with each other. I think that, this Saudi Arabian thing that Trump worked out, I think that's miraculous. I really do. I don't know if it'll last, but I think it was miraculous. That it was very capitalistic on everybody's part. Everybody was voting with their wallets, and everybody understood what they were doing. And it didn't matter what anybody, ideology didn't matter anymore. If you really think about it, it's in nobody's interest to have a Middle East that blows up, except for, evangelical groups that want Israel to die. So then Jesus will come again. That's why they're voting for a strong Israel. I mean, that's the reason. It's prophesied. And I hate it when people hope that we'll die, even when they support us. So do I think that things will change? I think it's a crazy place out there. This world has become Meshuggah. And in a Meshuggah world, Rabbi Moskowitz tells a wonderful story about the man in Sodom and Gomorrah who is the only righteous man. And he's yelling and screaming before Lot and Abraham come along. And he's screaming at everybody, saying, you people, you have to understand you're doing bad things. You're all crazy. And somebody comes up to him and says, nobody's listening to you. You're a voice in the wilderness. Why are you doing this? He says, why? He says, it's not that I want them to become like me. It's that I don't want to become like them. I hate what's going on. I hate the divisions. I hate it. A lady came up to me the other day yelling at me about wearing a mask. Swear to God. And she said to me, if God wanted us to have a mask, he would have given us masks. And I looked at her and I said, I see you're wearing eyeglasses. She didn't get it. She thought I was a little crazy. But then again, so does he.
Huh?
Are we about done? Hank Heiser's here. I got to leave.
Well, in about 20 minutes, we'll have our meditations. We'll begin with that as well. And just a nice way to relax or go sit in the garden, get some fresh air. It is a beautiful day. I will say, one of my favorite things with the new skylight is like this time of day when you can just watch clouds.
Right.
You know,
I was
hovering.
watching the clouds this
Really is beautiful. And the other nice thing for those who remember the old skylight with the plexiglass, about once a year we'd be during services and a storm would happen. And that was not something that was anticipated in the building of temple, how loud plexiglass would be, and because of the effect of how it just threw the sound in the entire sanctuary. And I remember it was Josh Kaplansky's bar mitzvah. You couldn't hear a thing. Poor kid was trying to read, couldn't hear him because it was just downpouring so loudly. We don't have that problem anymore. It's actually really peaceful during a storm in here. It's pretty cool.
And I'm not mic'd, so I don't want everybody to. I'm going to ask you, please. I am going right now because my face is not working properly. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go and I'm going to rest for a little bit. So everybody, stay. There are not that many people. So enjoy. This is a lovely place. Walk around. Look at the view.
We have a few more questions, and we'll take more.
Yeah, we can take them.
Some too, so we'll continue with Tish. One of the questions was Gordy Cranen mentioned how scary things were knowing many of the hate groups that are out there. How concerned should we be as Jews in America, and how vigilant do we need to be? And it's a question that we're thinking of often. And unfortunately, as you're well aware, as you're here and other places, the security measures that we have in place, it is a scary world. And I think there's a benefit to the preparations that we've taken care of, that we've taken into consideration, and fortunately, God willing, we'll never need to use them, but we have them in place. And as we look at our world, though, what do we do? How do we respond to it? How do we figure things out? And part of it is continuing to have conversations. There's a story that I read from a colleague in Omaha that started in May of 2020. And there was a young man that came and vandalized their synagogue property, put up swastikas on light posts, and the congregation had a choice of how they were going to respond to it. And the executive director, everybody else was telling him to go to the police and that they should press charges. And what they realized, and with their security cameras, it was a member of a white nationalist group that they were able to identify with the local police. And so people said, press charges. And the executive director took a different approach. He said, we're not going to press charges. I want to sit with him. I want to ask him why he did it. And I want him to be able to ask any question that he has about Judaism, Jews, to meet somebody who's actually Jewish. And they did that. And one meeting turned into another meeting, turned into another meeting, turned into another meeting, and eventually turned into a friendship. And in August, the young man came and offered an apology to the board of the congregation for what he had done. Not every situation is going to end like that. But I think it's a model for us to sometimes look at things and try to see things differently. And to realize that a lot of the hate that we see in our world is because people are ignorant. They've never had an opportunity to engage with some of the people that they hate, whether it's anti-Semitic and being involved in the Jewish community or seeing things around, or other forms of hate that we see as well. And that it takes one person seeing things differently sometimes to try and figure out, how do we change this? And as I talked about in my Erev Rosh Hashanah sermon, we're not going to change everything. We don't have the ability to do that, but we can affect one person one at a time sometimes. And that's what we have to aim to do.
I often think our role, being did I do that? Our role, okay, as rabbis in America, is, especially in the Midwest, is to be an ambassador to the non-Jewish world. Like, we represent Jews to the non-Jews. And whether it's students who come to visit us here or that we go to a school, I've been teaching at St. Mary's the past few years to intro to religion class of high school juniors. And it's really great with Zoom now. They can bring me in, and I did it 3 times this year. But in the time we can be together, they come to temple, and they see temple, and they learn about it. And it's really important that people understand us from that point of view so they can appreciate who we are rather than go on ignorance and lack of any information. And so it's something that's important. I remember when I lived in Israel in 1990, 91, it's bizarre when I think about that because it was my first year out of college, starting a rabbinical school. Why is it weird? If I go personal for a moment, following Daniel's footsteps, going personal. Not that we would ever talk about ourselves. So that my daughter graduated college last spring and is now, that same age, 22, going to be 23. And I'm thinking like, wow, I thought I was so old and mature then. And I look at her and I'm like, what? She's still my baby. Nonetheless, I was living there during the first Persian Gulf War, right? And we were sort of wrestling with what should we do? Should we stay in Israel? Should we come home? We were in bomb shelters. Our professors, a bunch of our professors weren't there. They were called up for Miluim, for reserve duty. Israel wasn't as organized where they were giving us, students. I said, well, could we volunteer somewhere? And for someone who's called up to military service, they weren't able to provide that for us. So my rabbi, who I have a great relationship with, he's retired now, he's in his 80s, he called me and told me I needed to come home for my Nana's sake because my papa had died a year earlier. And so Nana was alone and that I was going to give her a heart attack. I need to come home. So in retrospect, that was I would not do that as a rabbi. I don't think that was right of him to do, in a sense. I need to make that decision without that kind of pressure. My parents, to their credit, said, we support you whatever you decide. And I know that my mom would hang up the phone and cry. And this was a time, remember Saddam Hussein, we were carrying gas masks around. We had a little brown box. We had an atropine shot in there. We had the gas mask we learned how to put on. I was the wise ass who sent pictures of the gas mask of me sitting on the toilet on it to my parents saying, look, I can go into the bathroom right after my roommate. This is awesome. Remember, I was 22. So, because I've matured so much too, right? And those photos took a long time. There were no cell phones there, These were like, with a little date printed in the corner. So I did come home, and we wrestled with, do we go back now, and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, people don't understand Israel in America. We still have that same problem. You saw the resolution that was passed by the Burlington City Council in Vermont to support BDS and not invest in anything. People don't understand Israel. And we're not Israelis, but we know and understand Israel and can represent Israel to the non-Jewish world. And I think that's really important. And I began doing that then as a 22-year-old, then I was 23, about why Israel matters, why as Jews we're connected to Israel, and why Israel is a place of, that has so much positive as a part of it, not the negativity and the one-sided media portrayal that we see in this country so often. And so that was something that became very clear to me, that I can be a teacher to non-Jews almost as much as I can be a teacher to Jews as a rabbi in America. And I think it's something we don't take that responsibility lightly. Because sometimes a non-Jewish group will call the temple, we're super busy, and one of our assistants will say, oh, you don't have time for this right now. And almost always we're going to still take that meeting and do it. Alyssa?
I was wondering how often you have to explain Israel to American Jews. I know there's a lot of people who don't really understand.
How often do we have to explain Israel to American Jews?
Yeah, there are Jews at temple that we don't agree with about Israel here, right? I'm sure all of us in this room don't agree. I want people to come at it from a place of respect and understanding rather than just a place of, oh my God, Israel's the Goliath and Israel's, beating up on this David and Israel, all this negativity, because anti-Israel sentiments become the kosher anti-Semitism in a sense. Jews are fine. It's Israel I have a problem with, which is so skewed. And I think Jews, and one thing we talk a lot with our high school kids about is what they're going to face on college campuses, and appreciating and coming from a place of knowledge rather than getting tied up in that, because there are Jewish groups that we don't agree with, right? That, If Not Now is a group that I have a lot of issues with. I love the expression, if not now, right? But there's a group called If Not Now, which is really they've had Holocaust survivors come up and talk about, how Israel is behaving like the Nazis and stuff like that. So really problematic for us. And I feel even more compelled to speak out against Jews who are doing that than I do the non-Jews who are often coming from a place of ignorance.
Agreed.
It is. We had a really important conversation back in May when the war broke out in Israel, and there was real venom against Israel, especially on college campuses.
And social media.
Yeah, we were getting phone calls from our college kids. And just like we did with adults, we had open conversations on a Friday so that we could sort of help people with the language. And we had a number of college kids Zoomed in. It was, again, technology helps us. Zoomed in with us, right? And we had a really good discussion with those kids to help sort of frame the conversation so they could respond to people they were getting, beaten up by, in a sense. But we were all feeling it too, thanks to social media, like Rabbi said.
I think that the challenge is social media allows anybody to put any idea out there, and if it's passed around enough, then people think it's truth with a capital T. And the challenge that we see is that it's often the opposite. It's a popular opinion might not be accurate, might not have a historical background or an understanding to things, and that's where, as Rabbi is talking about us going into schools, meeting with people, Jews, non-Jews, with our high school students, with our kids, it's creating that foundation of knowledge so that people can understand why certain things might be happening. Doesn't mean that we always agree with them. Oftentimes we don't. But there's a historical perspective that's necessary in understanding what's going on in the Middle East. You can't just drop in 2021 and say, let's figure this all out, and everybody's going to shake hands and walk away, and there'll be peace in 10 years from now. God willing, one day there will be. And I've had tour guides that have talked about their vision, and some of them I really like in terms of what they've described, and have the potential for being successful. But the challenge is that people walk in with preconceived notions and look at things as if Israel is that strong Goliath in the area, not really understanding where Israel came from.
Yeah. On the two things, you have a question as well, Ms. Lowenthal, right? So I'll let you ask your question. I'm going to invite Brandon to come on up, our meditation leader, and get him mic'd up as you ask your question, and we'll do that too. How will the rise of the Taliban affect Israel? And will it affect Israel? It's interesting, as they announced they're making relations with all countries, including America, except Israel, right? Israel can be at times in the Arab world the one unifying thing they have. They can't agree on anything. Like, they want to keep what was revolutionary last year with the agreement with Morocco, and before that with Bahrain and UAE, things that was the reality that all these countries like the Palestinian problem because it was not to draw attention on themselves. And I'll say, it's not our fault, look at Israel, bad, bad, bad. I can't answer the question as far as knowing what the motives of the Taliban are. We know the economy is in dire situation, and there's going to be a real crisis there as far as food and what's going to potentially happen in the upcoming months. And hence why they want to have relations with the international world so they can get resources. Israel does amazing things. And you see in times, I remember it was the earthquake in Turkey, I think 7 years ago. Israel and Turkey don't have great relations. But the first one's on the ground there, mobile hospital, Israel's there, right? So Israel do everything possible to keep a door open and to work on that. Rabbi talked about, no matter what we think about Trump and the agreements that occurred a year ago, I give more credit to Netanyahu because Netanyahu was, and I'm not a fan of Netanyahu, as far as the internal politics of Israel and how he's brought in the ultra-religious to try to keep his power secure over the years. He was relentless in his constantly working on Dubai, on Bahrain, on Saudi Arabia, and trying to build those relations. And so that's why that door was open and that possibility occurred, and why Kushner could help make that happen. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, that's for sure. We can enjoy some meditation now. I guess I'll give this to you. Sound good? Thank you in advance, Brandon, for being a part of our temple family. Marsha Mitnick says hi.
I think what we're doing for those that are watching online, we're going to start off with a little bit of meditation now with Brandon as part of our extended Tish, and then there'll be a slight break. We do need to. I think there's a different video. So let's see. Brian, are you up there? Are you back? Here he is now. So we'll introduce Brandon, and actually let's just pause, and we'll start up again in 2 minutes as we switch the feed for those that are watching live stream. 2 minutes.
Check, check.